Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and today I want to chat with you guys a little bit about specialty bars and injury prevention, and mainly avoiding overuse injuries. I'm making different videos on this. This is stuff I'm going to talk a lot about in the future with you guys because I think what people need to understand is that specialty bars bring a lot to the table, and particularly for people like me who are very, very barbell focused, because I am of the general opinion that the barbell is the single best training tool ever invented for overall strength and conditioning. And I mean that bar none. Like, that should be where the majority of your work is. And I'm not saying other exercises aren't useful. Occasionally some smaller dumbbell work, and I'm not saying cables or machines or weighted bodyweight exercises don't have their place, because they do. They all have their place, but I am always going to push people in the general direction that barbell training should be the foundation of your work. It should be the foundation of your work. And there's a lot of reasons for that, and it's not just because of the powerlifting aspect. I would have field athletes do the same thing. But specialty bars bring a lot to the table for people who want to be barbell focused. And we could talk about some of them and the way they change range of motion and stuff like that, but that's their own kind of separate topic for individual bars, because not all bars do that. But one of the things that we have available to us for safety bars is that they change angles. They change angles. All of these bars, with some exceptions, in some way change your bar path or change the stress on specific tendons. Well, some people say, well, why would that matter? Well, a lot of bodybuilding types will understand that from what they would call their muscle confusion type perspective, which isn't necessarily always worded in a way that's correct. It's a concept that can work. It's not for the reasons they think it does. But it has to do with getting around accommodation, because minor changes can help with muscle growth, and you can sometimes hit neglected aspects of a muscle with minor changes. But what we're talking about here is the ability to prevent inflammation and prevent overuse injuries while continuing to overload. And if you look at a lot of these bars, just even that football bar that I'm using for overhead pressing, it changes the angle of the shoulder. The entire shoulder joint is a different angle with that because of the hammer grip used. It doesn't matter whether it's an overhead press or a bench press. We are changing the amount of rotation of the shoulder joint dramatically. I mean, that's an enormous change. Well, for people who have a history of shoulder injuries, that's fantastic. That's fantastic. In fact, for anyone who's had any problem, a history of shoulder damage, a football bar is not optional. This is a piece of equipment that you need. It's a game changer. It's a game changer for those people. But what about people who are just getting a little bit of shoulder inflammation in general from their pressing? Well, just changing that up for a phase can take that load off. And here's the thing. Does it work the pecs and triceps, or in this case delts and upper chest and triceps, just as much as a barbell? Yes. In some cases more. In some cases more. I mean, on the overhead press, my upper chest gets used even more with the football bar, because you have to do an incline, you have to lay further back at the bottom. That change in angles reduces your chances of overuse injuries. And people need to remember that. Advanced lifters do not get hurt for the reasons that people think they do. In other words, doing heavy lifting, it's not the heavy lifting that usually hurts advanced lifters. And a lot of people don't understand that. A training max very rarely injures you as an advanced lifter unless there are specific drugs involved. It very rarely injures you. It's your volume work that injures you. It's fatigue, accumulating fatigue, that injures you. And the reality is, the more advanced a lifter gets, the more volume they have to keep making changes or to even keep what they have. Volumes have to go up the more years of training experience that you have. Training volumes have to go up. We're also at much higher risk of overuse injuries accordingly. And if we snap something, that's usually what causes it. It's overuse. Having access to these different bars changes inflammation. If you're experiencing sometimes a little bit of tendonitis in your elbow, or a little inflammation in your shoulder joint, or a little inflammation in your IT band over by the knee, any of these little inflammations that start mounting up that can lead to tendonitis, or that can eventually lead to injuries if they become too severe, can be offset by changing bars. In other words, simply changing the barbell to a different barbell will sometimes eliminate these things. So if for the back squat you have that buffalo bar that I've got right there, right? Or a safety bar, it will change the angles. Now, the buffalo bar won't change angles on the lower body. The safety bar will. The buffalo bar is easier on your shoulders, though. It's one reason a lot of powerlifters use it, because it keeps the lower body angles identical. Your maxes are the same. If you're a 500-pound squatter with a straight bar, you're a 500-pound squatter with a buffalo bar. You're going to be within 1% of each other every time. Every coach who uses them notices that with their actual elite lifters. Been repeatedly noted. One reason it's popular. It's easier on the shoulders, though. And if it's easier on the shoulders, we can do more training volume. Same thing with the safety bar. A lot of times, because it's way easier on the shoulders, the safety squat bar, when we are putting a lifter through a pressing specialization, a lot of times a coach will have someone do more safety bar work. Buffalo bar works too for that, but the safety bar even more so. Why? Zero stress on the shoulders when squatting. But we still get great transfer to the lower body, the core, everything else. In fact, it's better for the core. More core specific squat and more T-spine specific squat. Less stress on the shoulders. So if you wanted to throw a large amount of training volume at someone as far as their pressing, these bars start to become really valuable. And I'm just using one example here. But again, the safety bar, easier on the shoulders in general. You do more training volume before your shoulders start to become aggravated. Well, more training volume equals more muscle and strength. Same thing, if you wanted to do more pressing specialization, you could do more safety bar, more buffalo bar, and things for squats. What happens? Less stress on your shoulders. If you have less stress on your shoulders, we can do more training for more specialization. So the reason that bar is called the football bar, by the way, is because it was developed for football players for that purpose. Having a very powerful bench and upper body is very valuable for a football player. They have to hit you and push you on a playing field. Obviously, being able to squat and pull and things matters because it's your full body, but they have to push people. Well, they're oftentimes plagued by shoulder injuries also. The football bar allows them to do a lot of really heavy pressing, even with a history of shoulder issues. That's why it was developed. That's why it's called football bar. But the concept is the same. All these different bars change angles, change ranges of motion. They change the way tendons get stressed on big lifts. When you're training with very large volumes of training, the ability to change the amount of stress or the type of stress you're putting on a tendon that is starting to get inflamed becomes enormous. Having access to bars like this can literally make the difference between having to deload or not. Because if you don't have access to more equipment variation like that, sometimes you just have to deload to let these things heal, which is fine, it works. But in many cases, changing your bars, if we're dealing with localized issues rather than a full system-wide issue, the bars can fix that. Same thing, I mean, if we're worried about chest mobility, pec mobility, look at that bar right there, buffalo bar for speed bench. Stretching the chest a little deeper at the bottom with a lighter weight. Right? Doing stuff like this with a lighter weight will slightly increase pec mobility. Might be less likely to tear a pec on a truly heavy max effort bench once you're fatigued. All right, these bars are insanely useful for injury prevention. They're insanely useful all the way around the board. That's why I have so many. That's why I have so many. I've learned to value these things as a slightly older lifter. I've learned to value these things. They have so much value. Having access to specialty bars brings more value to me as an advanced lifter, as a master's advanced lifter, than any gym stock full of extra machines and dumbbells ever could. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.